We hit 7,000 subscribers on this beautiful Yu-Gi-Oh channel, and so I answered some questions over on Instagram. If you aren't following me yet on Instagram or Twitter, you totally should. But yeah, look at this pro news setup. You know, when it comes to becoming big in YouTube, it's all about presentation! And so we're stepping it up a notch. If you could turn back time once and go back to your childhood and tell your younger self to buy a case of first edition LOB for a couple $100, however, it would get rid of all your memories with Yu-Gi-Oh and that nostalgic tingle at the sight of cards you loved, would you? Absolutely fucking not. Because if I could go back in time and tell my younger self to buy anything, I would tell him to buy Bitcoin. That would make more and I wouldn't lose one of my favorite franchises in the universe. It's all about being smart. What is the realistic probability of doing a BGS 9.5 crossover to a PSA 10? Generally, people accept that you want to have a bunch of 9.5s and or 10s and not have any 9s. And that way your odds of crossing would be decent. Now, I also know stories of people who have crossed with straight up just having regular 9s, and also vice versa. You know, you have some people crossing PSA 6s to BGS 9s and BGS 9.5s to PSA 10s with a variety of subgrades, because in the end, human graders can still make mistakes. They're not perfect. But yeah, overall, if you want to have maximal odds, you want to have no 9s. And some people also claim that breaking them increases the chance, so not having just the case being sent in, but rather taking the card out of the case and then sending it in raw. But that's added risk, because let's say you get a PSA 8 or 9, and now you have to resub it to BGS, maybe you no longer get your 9.5 back. That's some risk versus reward. Next question. I'd love to see you discuss sealed products. For example, buying sealed packs, LOB first, and discuss the risks of packs being weighed and so forth. Okay, so if you are buying a vintage Yu-Gi-Oh pack and it is a singular pack, not a box, you should always assume that it is weighed, scaled, mapped, whatever you want to call it. Some people say, oh, it's really hard to weigh Glossy or whatever. Sure, but people can still just open packs until they pulled all the major holos and then stop opening and send the rest off for grading, get a nice PSA 10 pack of something where you know it is a light, or even just sell the lights. That is the strategy. And so yeah, always assume singular pack, weight, mapped, scaled, whatever you want to call it. The only way out of this is if you are following a member of the community who does box breaks where they aren't scaling or mapping, where you literally know I'm buying this pack and I'm probably paying a premium because I trust this person not to have scaled or mapped anything, and then they break it on a YouTube channel live so that you know there's no funny business. For example, Vintage Yu-Gi-Oh does this sometimes. I've seen him talk about his Ancient Sanctuary box, so if that's something you're interested in, you can hit him up. Don't have a question, just wanted to say I love your channel and keep up the awesome work. I've recently gotten back into Yu-Gi-Oh and your content has been super helpful. Thank you so much. And holy fuck, you have a lot of followers. Why don't you like collecting OCG Japanese Yu-Gi-Oh cards? It's not about not liking, it's just that I never grew up on them. Generally, I collect stuff that I actively remember loving as a kid. And so you see me buy Blue Eyes and Toons and Cyber stuff and all that kind of stuff basically that I remember from back then. Whereas for Japanese cards, I don't remember them. I didn't grow up in Japan, nor with those cards, and so, I don't know, the connection just isn't there. Even though some of these may be great investments and they may look cool, and there's definitely a niche for them, lots of people enjoy them, it's just not for me. I like the nostalgia. Do you see the unpopularity of Yu-Gi-Oh amongst children due to the failure of Yu-Gi-Oh 7s and perhaps the later series to be a dark foreshadowing of Yu-Gi-Oh not lasting another 10 years? While having a kid audience definitely helps, it is not the end-all be-all, and beyond that, Yu-Gi-Oh is doing fine with kids. It's not popping off in the same way Pokemon is, but there's still a variety of kids that do play. So if you had to compare it to other hobbies, I would say there's more kids playing Yu-Gi-Oh than playing Magic, but there's less kids playing Yu-Gi-Oh than playing Pokemon. So it's kind of in the middle. But then look at Magic. Magic's vintage market and their tournament market is still flourishing without kids. Now, may that mean that MTG might do worse in the future later down the line? Potentially, but I'm personally not too concerned. Before COVID, Yu-Gi-Oh was still breaking tournament attendance records. It was still growing. Could you talk a little bit about the market of TCG English cards in Europe vs USA? So I've covered this kind of on the channel before, but essentially most of the big collecting and grading and so forth happens in the US. You know, you have your sports cards industry that helped PSA and BGS be a major deal. So you have a lot of companies focusing on trading cards you know, around that industry because, again, you have a lot of capital active in that industry. You have a larger audience in the US purely because you're a big ass country with a lot of people. And so the love for the old American cards is also bigger. And so there's just this giant wave of reasons as to why collecting US cards is more viable than Europe right now. You have way more capital because you have all these companies built on that because of sports cards and just a way larger market. Now, does that mean that European cards are all shit? No, absolutely not. Generally, European old cards still have some value, just not as high. I do sometimes buy them if I feel like, this card's pretty cheap, you know. I'm still getting an LOB first edition Celtic Guardian or whatever, but I would never, ever, ever pay the same premium as for American cards. The future of Yu-Gi-Oh investing. Is it too late to start and are we in for a big crash? Or the prices are still low and have huge potential in the future? You shouldn't necessarily look at this black and white. I believe that Yu-Gi-Oh as a whole market, is still immature and young as fuck. I'm still buying at these prices. I believe longer term, 5 or 10 years, a variety of vintage, original, first edition, high grade cards will be more expensive then than now. But notice all the little ifs and buts I put in there. I think Yu-Gi-Oh as a whole is due for maybe a correction or slowdown. It is possible that a year or 2 years from now, certain cards will be lower. But I believe longer term, or well, I guess 5 years is midterm, and who knows how much further out. To me, it is perfectly possible that the best of the best will be way higher than they are now. I feel a lot of these cards are extremely underpriced. But when a collectible market becomes more mature, the winners generally start to win big, while the losers start to slow down or lose big. And that is very important to realize. We've had this mania where everything is up, 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 and that's fun, but in my opinion, that can't keep going on forever. So do I think it's too late? Absolutely not. Again, I'm still buying at these prices, but very particular cards. I do not believe that if you are buying Unlim PSA 6s right now, that those will be much higher 10 years from now. But again, collectibles markets. These are volatile. Shit can go down, up, down, up, down, up. It doesn't matter to me. I think at the end of the road, these will be more valuable than they are now. What's your top 3 favorite Yu-Gi-Oh cards of all time? That's a tough one. I don't think I have a top 3. I mean, SDK Blue Eyes needs to be up there. Some Cyber card needs to be up there. Maybe some Toon card needs to be up there. I guess it would be SDK Blue Eyes, Cyber, and Blue Eyes Toon. But even then, there's so many other cards that I would gladly put into that category, you know, depending on the day, depending on how I woke up. I would need to have a top 20 list to really give an honest opinion there. How do you see what an item sold for on eBay when it says best offer accepted? You can go to slabwatch.com, put in the link, and it will tell you what the offer was actually accepted at. You can also use this weird like Google Chrome plugin and look at the source code and so forth, but I don't know, I'm too lazy for that. My question is, what's your thoughts on the highly fluctuating difference in price between raw and graded cards? Should there be some consistency between raw cards and their equivalent graded counterparts? Say a raw card should have 60 or 70% etc. value of the graded card. Assumption is card condition judgments are accurate. That's where the problem begins. Card condition judgments aren't accurate. People consistently, completely misjudge all of their cards. And beyond that, if you buy a raw card and you grade it, even though you think you may have, you know, judged accurately, you may have been dead wrong. And so no, there is no set amount because every single human thinks their cards are mint when they are really, really not. That is the whole point of a grading service to begin with. You know, it's not like all the value is in the piece of plastic. The value is in the people giving authority to this brand and their graders to, as accurately as possible for said human, give it a solid grade for its condition. So no, there's no 60 or 70 or blah, blah, blah. If I check out a card and I'm looking at it and it's perfect, it's absolutely perfect, and it's raw, I will try to pay PSA 8 prices because you're still just judging a picture. You know, you're still just judging a photo of a card online. And even in multiple angles and so forth, you still can't catch everything. So by me paying PSA 8 raw on something that's extremely minty, I at least have a little bit of a buffer if I miss something. Again, on one card I may still get screwed, but if I make that choice 200 times, then the average should work out favorably for me. Now, as grading gets more popular, this trick becomes worse and worse and worse, because almost everyone is learning how to assess their own cards accurately, meaning they're only selling what's gonna be a PSA 8 or 7 or whatever. And so when I then am only paying 8 prices on cards that are mint, but they're not actually mint, they're gonna be 8s, and the seller knows that, well, then the whole thing falls apart. And while that margin is maybe like 10 or 20%, if you consistently make that 10 or 20% loss margin by using this trick, it stops working. So I think now, because of 2020 and the craze in the Yu-Gi-Oh market, I don't think that trick is gonna keep on working. And we're almost moving to a point where buying raw becomes, you know, just not worth it, because all of the minty stuff is just mostly gone. So you really need to buy collections in real life or get real lucky. That's also a thing. Right now I see a lot of people trying to sell their raws for graded prices, and that's absolute insanity. Why do people go to proxies or middlemen to get cards graded instead of signing up to PSA and doing it directly through them? Because it's far fucking easier. You are not the one handling all the BS, especially if you're from Europe. Trust me on this, you know, I could make an entire video on grading if you're a European, and if you want to see that, let me know in the comments. But to me, Yu-Gi-Oh cards should not be a full-time job. If I'm doing Yu-Gi-Oh as a full-time job, I should be paid way fucking more for it. You know, I run my companies. That is 80 or 90% of my time. All of this extra stuff is just fun. And so if I'm constantly monitoring everything and making this and that and bullshit like that, nah. I would much rather just, oh, I buy a card. After a while I have a stack, I send it off to someone else, go, okay, enjoy, I'll see my card in a million years. That's it. That's just easy. Again though, if you're from the US and you know what you're doing, absolutely just do it yourself. What do you think about the DDS promos as an investment, which were on the other version of the game, not that with Blue Eyes? I think people need to be aware that game promos are very mass printed, and also often in extremely good condition. Now, does that mean none of them will go up? Absolutely not. It's just that you're taking on a bit more risk. It also depends on which game, of course. Some were not made as much as others. It also depends on, do you get that art anywhere else? For example, if you're looking at the Kuribo from PCY, you will not get a Kuribo with that art in that prismatic foiling anywhere else. I even forgot what's in DDS. Is it the Seiyaryu and the Salaman sword, whatever the fuck? Is it that? You know, is that iconic enough? Do people care enough? I don't know. I would be very careful around buying them purely because you think, well, they're DDS. Yeah, the reason the DDS Blue Eyes is worth that much is because it's fucking Blue Eyes. The reason DDS Dark Magician is growing is because it's fucking Dark Magician. It's not because it's DDS. There's plenty of Game Boy cards that no one gives a damn about. Now, these may go up, these may be great, but just be aware of the risks. I do like them though, they're pretty cool. What is your take on NFTs potentially moving on to the TCG market? I am bullish on NFTs from a utility perspective. So for example, I work in the music industry. The whole way royalties work and how artists are paid is extremely antiquated. So it's entirely possible that smart contracts and by extension NFTs are going to play a major role from a utility perspective in the music industry. However, that is extremely different from me saying, oh, I can't wait to buy a JPEG of Blue Eyes White Dragon that Konami made together with Top Shots or whatever the fuck, and now I can buy it and collect it just like my cards. In the end, if you are a card collector, you are collecting the physical item of a card. Now, I'm no boomer. I'm not against NFTs and the collectible NFT world or anything like that, though it will enter bubble territory and there will probably be a bust, after which the actually valuable ones, the actual winners, the interesting ones will probably have a bright future, you know. Again, NFTs from a utility perspective I believe in, but would I now start throwing money if someone puts some Yu-Gi-Oh stuff into NFTs? Absolutely fucking not. What do you think about Dragons of Legend as a collector set? Does it appeal to DM fans and is it worth investing into that because of that? It depends on far too many factors. Does it appeal to DM fans? Yes and no. So from a yes perspective, yes, people who love those old arts and those cards from back in the day and now want to have a cheap entry point into enjoying those cards, it's great for that. But look at that caveat, the cheap entry point. This is not appealing to people who specifically want the original. A lot of the love for dual monsters is nostalgia in its purest form. And someone with large capital who wants to have that nostalgia hit, they will go for the original card if that is still available. You know, they don't want this cool reprint set with the cool nostalgia pandering when the actual proper original is still available on the market for a high price, sure. But again, if you're buying this, you are hoping that it's gonna reach a high price. But for that to be the case, those people with, let's say you have 5,000 bucks to relive your childhood. Are you gonna spend it on the card that you can actually still buy, the original? Or are you gonna buy Dragons of Legend? You're gonna go for the original. Now again, it's fine for a cheap entry point into nostalgia, that's great, and maybe it grows because of that, but I would not buy something purely because it panders to nostalgia. Half Yu-Gi-Oh sets pander to nostalgia. There's almost every year some new collector set and a Dizzy thing and a Blue Eyes and another Blue Eyes and a Dark Magician Girl and another of this. They'll keep on printing those. That constantly appeals to DM fans. That doesn't mean it will see growth that's similar to the actual originals. Personally, that's why I don't go for it. It's really not worth it to me to buy a box that's 80 to hope it goes to 120 and then spend all the time to move in and sell and blah 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 to then make that 40 bucks profit, even though that was a great profit. But again, that's a big if. Maybe it doesn't grow and then it's dead money. Maybe it does. Do you think Wavy Legend of Blue Eyes first edition cards will always hold a premium over Glossy, or could it level out in the long term? I believe it will level out in the long term. I think people are gonna be less and less picky as cards come to market less often. You know, as cards become more and more rare because they just vanish into collections and the pop isn't large enough to sustain all collectors. If you, let's say you have a chance to buy a Red Eyes Black Dragon LOB first edition PSA 10 and you have that chance once every 10 months, will you hold off because it's a Glossy? A lot of people will say fuck no. I don't care enough to wait another 10 months and hope it's a Wavy. Now, we're currently not necessarily there yet, but I do see us entering such territory further down the line. And so for that reason, as the prices goes up, cards vanish into collections forever, I think the premium will gradually evaporate. Will it exist in like a 2 or 3 or 5 or 10% upcharge? Maybe, but for the longest time it was 30%. And I think that's just ridiculous. Some people will pay the premium. You know, we saw it on the Celtic Guardian. But I don't know. Look at the Blue Eyes sales, right? Those two sales were for 85. Well, they were both Glossy. What was the last sale for a Wavy? Where is it? I don't know. I also think it's important to realize that Wavy looks better on some cards than on others. You know, Wavy is not first print. That's relatively established by now. Glossy probably came first. So the only premium you're paying for is slightly more scarce, and I'm saying slightly, and the aesthetics. So on the Celtic Guardian, for example, it was very faded and wavy, and so it has that very vintage aesthetic. Someone was clearly willing to pay more for that. However, if you have a card that doesn't necessarily look better in Wavy, I don't think that's necessarily worth it. For example, a lot of people love Flame Swordsman in Wavy specifically, so maybe Flame Swordsman will hold a special premium in Wavy, while something like a, I don't know, some Exodia limb or something will not hold a premium after a while. Again, it's very subjective stuff. I know you don't necessarily do pack openings on the channel, but is that something you will ever start incorporating? I'd love to see what you pull from Ghosts from the Past. I do pack openings very, very rarely. Is it fun to open a pack? Yeah, but for me, that's not what this channel is about. I hope to bring solid information and bring the Yu-Gi-Oh! Vintage market somewhat closer to maturity. I don't feel I'm necessary in the pack opening world. There's great channels out there already opening packs and being excited and extra entertaining and so forth, and like Ruxin, and they're doing a great job at that. Will I open Ghosts from the Past? Yeah, I think it'll be fun hunting for some ghosts. Cool, but it's definitely not the cornerstone for my channel. It's max 10%, even that. I think it's currently at 4% or so of my videos. From the hype you've previously spoke about on the channel about Ghosts from the Past, how much do you believe each box will cost after release compared to the pre-order sale price of whatever the hell? I don't know. You know, these are the types of things that no one can predict. Some people look at YouTubers and they hope that they can tell them, oh, it's gonna be this price, so you should buy at this price and then you have this profit and whoa. Like, no one can predict the future. No one. We all learn consistently. It's even harder right now because we still don't know if Dark Magician Girl is in Ghosts from the Past, and that's crucial information. A big part of that price spike only happened with the Dark Magician Girl leak. So if that is not real and it's some very random card no one gave a damn about, then I don't know how well the price will keep on evolving compared to with her. So we'll see. So those were the questions. Hope you found this interesting. Be sure to smash like. Wow, I'm a real YouTuber now. Subscribe, and I will see you soon. Ciao.